Welcome to Let's Talk Memoir, a podcast for memoir lovers, readers, and writers. I'm your host, Ronit Plank. Let's Talk Memoir is also a Substack newsletter. About once a month, I publish memoir craft advice, answer questions about memoir writing, and share my latest classes and upcoming events. You can go to substack.com and subscribe to Let's Talk Memoir for free. You can also find me, Ronit, on Instagram and on Blue Sky. Before this episode begins, I want to share with you a couple of offerings coming up in September and October if you are interested in taking a memoir class. First up, September 4th begins my 92nd Street Y Roundtable class, which will be online. It's called Reading Contemporary Memoirs, The Complicated Mother. And we're going to be meeting on Fridays for 1 hour online to discuss 4 different memoirs and their narrative arcs and how the memoirist portrays the complicated mothers in their life and talk about the legacy of complicated childhoods and attachment and really anything we want to when it comes to these narratives and the choices that the memoirists made. There's no homework. There's no writing. This is talking and thinking and delving into narrative structure and into the psycho-emotional dynamics on the page. If you are looking for a writing class, a memoir writing class, my next one begins on October 13th, and this is online at the University of Washington Continuum School, so it's open to all. It is called Memoir Writing, Finding Your Story, and we're meeting in the evenings. Each class is 3 hours long, and we're going to be writing, doing prompts. You're going to get to workshop your material. We're going to be analyzing memoirs, talking about all the tools that we discuss on the show. And if you're interested in either of these classes, go to ronitplank.com and scroll down the page and you will find these upcoming events and links to find more information and to register. And I've got another class launching in 2027, which I will post soon. That is going to be another class that's about 5 weeks long in an exciting new venue that I'm excited to share about. I can't do it yet, but I will soon. If you'd like updates, please subscribe to my Let's Talk Memoir Substack. Those are free subscriptions, and I will always keep you posted about new class offerings. Before we get to this episode, I want to thank you for being a Let's Talk Memoir listener, and thank you so much for sharing the episodes and for subscribing to the Let's Talk Memoir Substack. I have some other really good news to share with you, and I will be doing that soon. And now, on to this week's episode. Today, my guest is Jason Allen, who writes fiction, creative nonfiction, and poetry. For his novel, The East End, Bonnie Jo Campbell provided the cover blurb. Every page is filled with wise insights about social class and the human heart. Jason has since been nominated for an Edgar Award and the Georgia Author of the Year Award. His poetry collection, A Meditation on Fire, is now with Black Lawrence Press, and he has published essays with Salon, Literary Hub, and The Strand Magazine. Jason teaches creative writing in the MFA program at Wichita State University and lives in Kansas with his sweet rescue dog, Luna. His brand new memoir is Boys Without Fathers. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks so much, Ronit. My dog is in the room with me too, so we mentioned this before we started recording. You might hear my dog.
How old is Luna now? Because I remember when you posted about getting Luna.
Yeah, that was in 2019, and she was about 2 years old then, so now she's about 8.5.
Yeah. What is her mix? Do you know what kind of a mix she is?
She's definitely a lab mix, but she's mixed with at least one other breed.
Yeah, she's beautiful. Let me just say that we're going to talk about your new memoir, Boys Without Fathers, but we first talked on my podcast and then everything changed about your upbringing and we were talking
Yeah.
about your novel, The East End. And prior to that, I have to share that you and I met via our MFA program at Pacific University virtually. You posted very generously, and this is really important for writing community, everyone. You posted on the Facebook group for Pacific University MFA students, if I've got this right, that you'd had some success. Your novel was about to come out or it was out, and you would like to pay forward the good luck and everything that had happened for you with the book if anyone wanted advice or input or would like a query letter written for them, you were volunteering to do that. And I jumped at the chance, even though
Yeah,
you finished your MFA before me. And I wrote to you and I said, yes, please help me. And you actually wrote the query letter for my memoir when she comes back.
it's funny because I forgot some of the details about that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so glad that I put that post out there because you really never know where these things are going to lead. And I consider you a good friend now, and we haven't even met in
I
person.
know. We haven't really met in person. Maybe we'll meet at an AWP sometime.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, but then you did that for me, and I was so grateful, and I got a lot of bites from agents because of your letter,
Uh-huh.
and now my book is in the world, and now you have a memoir in the world, so can you share a bit about Boys Without Fathers?
Sure, and thank you so much. I really appreciate that you're interviewing me just to begin with. And I know your memoir well too. I just want to
Yes.
mention that Ronit's memoir is awesome. So
Wait, Jason, I think you edited my memoir.
I did.
Like, you worked on it too. You were one of my editors.
Yeah, I think I was your final editor, and then you went out to agents and things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes.
No, and that was perfect timing. That was the beginning of the summer again, and I teach, so that was the one period of time when I could do that kind of
Yeah,
thing
you
too.
are so busy teaching. You do so much, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk about that because I'd be curious to know how that is going for you and all that, but we have
Sure.
so much to cover, so
Yeah.
please share a bit about your new memoir, Boys Without Fathers.
Okay, so I'm really happy with the cover. I'll start with that. The photo on the cover is me and my little brother. I'm the taller one with the mushroom haircut. Because this was the early 80s, and my mom literally just, I mean, she did put a bowl over my head, but she just pretty much snipped around like that. And so my brother and I grew up as working class kids. We were really working poor when we were really young. We had pigs and chickens in our backyard on Eastern Long Island, which was completely strange. But I loved that. I loved that we had like this sort of like adventure world in the backyard pretty much because there was a pig pen and a chicken coop, and my mom's garden was all overgrown. And so my brother and I were always outside, always playing, always using our imaginations. But we had a lot of things that we, like growing up, a lot of challenges, like a lot of people do. My father was an alcoholic. And so a lot of my early childhood, I think, was defined by the way that I felt in relation to my father.
Mhm.
And I think about that a lot with my brother, even more than me, because he's 3 years younger. So my father's quickness to anger could be really scary. And I think it's something that I don't hear talked about quite as much, but like there's all sorts of different types of violence. And I think there's like this blend between emotional violence and the threat of physical violence that
Mhm.
a lot of people grow up with that. And my brother and I definitely did. We had a weird childhood in a way because my mom ended up working for a billionaire family because the Hamptons were right there, but we were really still poor. So I got to see that disparity as well. But the book itself, it begins in 2008 when I was bringing my brother to a detox center in Portland. A lot of the book has to do with addiction. My brother fell into hard drug addiction. And ironically enough, it was right around at the point when I decided that I needed to get sober myself from alcohol. The latter part of the book, I'd say from the second half to the end, is us as adults and grappling with addiction and grappling with our relationships, our relationship as brothers. Prior to that, you get to see a lot of the foundational stuff. So there's some little kid years going into like mid teens, and kind of like the trajectory that my brother and I were on wasn't dictated by either of our parents, but they definitely had a big influence.
Yeah, you've kinda created your own world. The parents
Yeah.
are there, your father more than your mom in terms of on the page, but it's really about you and your brother.
Yeah, absolutely. And that only came from writing this so many times too, and like, rethinking this memoir a million times, which I know that you understand how many times we go through and rethink. It really did become a book about my brother, how much I love my brother, how we stayed close through some really difficult years too, because he fell into heroin and pill addiction. It was a really bizarre timing because it began when I first tried to get sober, but I didn't really know how to do anything with that yet. I didn't really want to commit to recovery. I just wanted to stop drinking because I knew it was a problem. So I had a couple of life lessons as my brother was falling into drugs where I needed to actually like seek help for myself. And once I did, and once I was like really clear, like I'm excited to potentially be sober now and
Mhm,
maybe for the rest of my life, it was this weird, complete and total like lightning bolt kind of moment for me finally.
mhm.
It was extra hard to see my brother suffering as I was in early sobriety. I was seeing all these friends of mine from meetings that were getting better and better each day. And for a
Yeah.
while, I was worried that my brother was going to die almost every day. But I've always been the type of person where it's like the stories that move me the most, probably a lot has to do with my lived experience, I would say, but it's people that have had to struggle and struggle and struggle. And then there's always some hope along the way, no matter how dark it gets. And in the end, there's, if not closure, there's like a sense that we've learned more about the situation and there's hope ahead.
Mhm, mhm. There's that change, yeah.
The first draft of this was written in 2015 over one summer.
Mhm.
After a visit to my mom and brother in Oregon, I drove all the way back to New York, which is where I was at the time.
Binghamton, which is really
Yeah. Oh, and you went to Binghamton
I
too, isn't
went
it?
to Binghamton
That's
for
so weird.
undergrad, but you
Yeah.
went there to teach, right? You were teaching there.
I went there for my PhD
Oh, your
program. Yeah.
PhD, okay.
But I did start teaching during that program.
Yeah, we have so many little intersections.
Yeah. Yeah, so I drove all the way across country, which was about the 15th time I've done that. I love doing really long road trips. But when I got back from that visit, it was just an especially intense visit, and that became part of the memoir towards the very end of the memoir.
Yes.
You remember, like, when I visited the residency in the memoir and my mom got
Yes.
a phone call?
Yes.
So, without spoiling anything for people that are gonna read the book, I will say, like, that was the most intense visit that I've probably ever had with my mom and brother, but it also was the first time in years that I felt hopeful because,
Mhm.
in a sense, my brother came so much closer to dying that he had this new will to live, and so by the time I got in my car to start driving, I really felt, like, way more optimistic about his future than I had for a long time. So I got home and in a fury, I wrote 250 pages in like 6
Wow.
weeks. But this was like a memoir that I knew I was gonna write for most of my life by then. So sometimes when you know that you have a lot to get out in a certain day, I had to let myself start the memoir finally, and then it just kinda took over. It took another 10 years to really come up with this finished draft.
Okay, wow. Your earlier books were the novel The East End and then your book of poetry and meditation on fire. So when you were earning your MFA and working on those books, you already knew you were gonna write the memoir someday?
Yeah, I knew for years prior to the MFA even that I was gonna probably try to write a memoir. I didn't know if that was maybe as important to me as writing novels because I knew way, way, way back I wanted to write novels, like, as a teenager. But I actually started by writing poetry, and then I wrote a lot of short stories for years and creative nonfiction. Now that I committed to this memoir, a lot of what didn't end up in the book ended up as a standalone piece, like a chapter that was originally in the
Yeah.
book, I plucked out and revised a little and sent to journals or magazines. So it's nice that some of the portions of previous drafts of the memoir are published.
Yes, and also you can
Yeah.
use some of them for promotion in conjunction
Yeah.
with the book coming out. So let me ask you, 2015, you got all this material out, and then over the next years, did you go back to it again and again? Did you let it sit in a drawer? Did you feel optimistic about the manuscript, but you weren't getting the kind of feedback you wanted? And I know you were also really busy teaching and writing this novel, The East End. So
Yeah.
how much actual work did you do on it in the intervening years?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's also a really hard one to answer because I do write multiple genres, and I did sort of juggle some manuscripts at times. It's hard to say if I really even worked on the memoir at all certain years during those 10 years. But then, like, I would take turns with projects. For whatever reason, I would feel like, you know what, I need to go back to the memoir instead of working on the novel again for now. And then you go down a rabbit hole all over again. Because with memoir, I was just talking to one of my really good friends who's also a memoirist, and she's trying to finish one of her two memoirs right now. The big challenge that I found was that we have way more than enough material. More often than not, the people who are driven to write memoir have a lot of material to work with.
Yeah.
And so then it's just a matter of what needs to be in this narrative. It's not that
Yes.
that isn't a compelling story in itself or an anecdote that people are going to want to read, but that might be a standalone piece. Or it might just be part of a second memoir if we go that far to write another one.
Right. And so for you, I mean, I was going to ask you about the structure and how you knew what to include in this and where to frame it. Did that become clear to you later on? Is that something that you came to understand as time passed?
Yeah, definitely. I think it was partly because I spent 6 years querying agents total. Like this wasn't just for the memoir, this was for multiple manuscripts. And I got some really, really good responses from agents to the memoir. Like I got a good amount of manuscript requests. So I guess I know how to write the
You
query
do,
letter
you
pretty
definitely
well.
know how to write, and you also know how to do a compelling query letter, yeah.
But a lot of times, for anybody who's not experienced with this at all, like when you get feedback from an agent, they're not giving you very much detailed feedback. From my experience, I had a lot of manuscript requests over that 6 year period for novels and also for the memoir, early drafts of it. And more often than not, when they pass, it's still vague or it's really conflicting with the other agent that
Yes.
passed. Like one person will say, I absolutely love the voice, but the plot just didn't really grab me. And then the next person says the exact opposite.
Yeah, it can be really difficult. That's why I think your trusted readers, your sense of your own craft are so important. And of course, though, we do have to weigh in. We do need to know what the agents and maybe the publishing houses think if we
Yeah.
want to work with them, right? So it's really hard, I feel like, creatively to balance our vision and what we know to be true and what we're trying to create with whether or not we need to listen to other people.
Yeah, and how much? Yeah, it's definitely which people for sure.
Yeah.
With teaching too, it's a whole other perspective. I mean, I was an editor for a couple of literary journals when I was in my graduate programs, and then when I was also just teaching later. And so, like, I've been on the other side of things in a sense too, like assessing submissions and accepting or rejecting and everything. So you really just have no control once you let go of what you've done. So just putting in our very best effort and being patient with it. That's also one of the hardest things is patience.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I mean, if your manuscript is out with agents, you have to wait so long sometimes.
Yeah. I'm at least saying for myself, I was just finishing the MFA program at Pacific in 2012. And so I know I was querying that year at least.
Mhm.
It took until 2017 to sign with my agent. And I decided probably during the Pacific MFA that I was going to make this happen no matter what. I had no idea that it was going to take so long or that it was going to have so many extreme ups and downs because I think that the hardest part was when I had a lot of requests for manuscripts and I had a lot of agents in possession of my manuscript. And I was just in my own head.
Sure. Well, then, so what do you feel was very different about writing this memoir from working on fiction, if you can even pinpoint that? Is there a different thing that happens inside of you when you're working on memoir?
It's funny because sometimes I feel like memoir is easier than writing a novel, and sometimes I think it's way harder. It probably depends on which portion of the book I'm working on, though, honestly. Like when I wrote the original draft of the memoir, it was during a time, the summer break between semesters, where I was able to be like just barely taking care of myself and just working on the memoir. And there were times when I was so like, I don't know if I've ever felt this actually, now that I'm really thinking about it. Like the amount of emotional energy it took, not that it was like I was in despair or anything, but just that energy for the effort to write certain parts. I would be so depleted that I would basically like crawl into my bed and take like a 3 hour nap.
Sure. Well, I was going to ask how you take care of yourself
Yeah.
because you're working on this very, very tender material. This has to do with the violence that you earlier explained about growing up with your father and the poverty and the adventures you and your brother had, but also that insecurity, then addiction. And you're sober now, you're in recovery, but working on something so fraught, I imagine, can wreak havoc. I mean, it wreaks havoc with all of us. So, aside from the long naps, was there anything else you did to take care of yourself?
Well, I think the key, like, and this is for my whole life really in recovery, it's about 19 and a half years since I got sober, which is
Yeah,
really crazy
congratulations.
that,
It's just amazing.
thank you. It's really crazy that it's that close to 20 years now.
Yeah, it's really amazing. It's wonderful.
Thank you. I also teach memoir at Wichita State along with mostly fiction, but I teach some memoir too, which is my favorite thing to teach, honestly,
Ooh,
because
we'll have to talk about that.
yeah, because students have breakthroughs, like it's
Yeah.
just a completely different thing. But in recovery, the biggest thing that was emphasized at the beginning was to just stay really connected to people in recovery, make a lot of phone calls. For a lot of us, that's way out of our comfort zone, shyer people. But I got super used to that during my first couple years sober. I talked to people on the phone endlessly, all types of people too, at all different hours of the day.
Is it about reaching out, about making contact, letting yourself be seen?
Yeah, or even just answering the phone
Ah,
because
yeah.
you give someone else a chance to talk about what's going on with them, and then you get a chance to listen to them. And I really am big on active listening. now, especially when I'm in a classroom or something. I really want every student to feel like I'm listening closely.
I have to say I'm the same. I think that's one of the most important things, and I think people can usually tell when somebody is not listening or paying attention. And
Yeah.
I bet, Jason, I would venture to say that maybe your childhood helped you understand how important it is to be actually seen and listened to. I know for me it did, and I try really hard to maybe not let people feel the way I felt
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah, honestly, I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot to be said because I mentioned depression at the end of the book too. Like, I really came to terms with that way after I got sober. I was at least 10 years sober. Just to even admit to myself that I had depression, that I'd been
Mhm.
depressed, really, like, not just situationally, but my whole life, it was there with me. So self-care really during the pandemic, just for depression too, became like an added necessity, I felt like.
Mhm.
And a huge part of it is really just staying super accountable and connected to my closest people. And some of them are in recovery, some aren't. But I have some friends that aren't in recovery that don't have any issue drinking really. And they're like family at this point, like the chosen family that those of us that come from kind of a broken home experience. Like it really is. We've talked about when we all retire way later, like that we should all live in the same little spot or whatever so we can hang out all the time. But self-care beyond staying really connected with people that care. For me, I go through cycles with nutrition and also with exercise, and usually they go hand in hand. But I always feel so much better when I exercise. And I think working on Memoir, it would be like the best possible time for me to take breaks to
Yeah.
get some of that energy out.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I picked out a couple of excerpts, and I'm hoping you can
Yeah.
read the first excerpt, which begins on page 45. And if you feel like you need to introduce it, definitely go ahead. And it's ending two-thirds down on page 47.
Okay.
Yeah, so you guys are about how old at this point?
I want to say that I was 11 and my brother was 8.
Mhm.
I had more emphasis on addiction, I think, in previous drafts too. So I really wanted to emphasize this was pretty much like the trip that we took with our father right before our very, very first times like drinking and stuff like that.
And also, he's currently dry sober at this
Yeah.
point, right? He's not drinking, but he's
Yeah.
not doing anything to stay healthy, really.
Yeah. I also did notice that there's a huge difference there too. And my brother's name is Jess, so that's by then Jess mostly got the wrong kind of attention from our father. He was either silent and unseen or the focus of punishment. I tried to be perfect. I got straight A's. I pushed myself to stand out for recognition in any way possible, even though I was painfully shy. At the end of sixth grade, I received the American Legion Award for the best all around student, and a year before that, I climbed to the top of the ropes in gym class with my legs out straight the entire time, which no other kid had ever done in Hampton Bays. So the gym teacher named the L Club after me and taped a Polaroid of me gripping the ropes on the gym wall. I realize now that each of these achievements provided a much needed boost to my low self esteem, but they also kept me out of the crosshairs for one more day. When I could say I'd done something especially well, I had a way to protect myself from Pop's otherwise constant criticism, which applied not only to his 2 kids, but also to Mom. He still picked me apart plenty, but I also always worried about Jess. I worried for him in all situations. He was my one and only little brother, after all, but I worried most whenever he stood in Pop's orbit. As far back as I can remember, I wanted to protect him, but maybe the harshest lesson I've ever learned is that I've had almost no power to shield Jess from any danger, including from Pop. I should have realized more clearly then that I never had the capability to physically protect my brother from an adult while I was still a kid myself. Back at the campground, after continuing to curse the boat rental guy to us, even after being reimbursed, Pop told us to take turns changing out of our wet clothes in the tent so we could go for a drive and find a restaurant. And make sure you don't track in any mud, he said. Jess and I each shrugged or nodded, but hadn't replied with words, so he added much more intensely, "You guys hear me? I mean it. Take your shoes and socks off outside before you step into the tent. I'm going to be pissed if you track any mud in where we're sleeping tonight." He gave us the hard stare until Jess and I both said we wouldn't get any mud on anything, and the familiar knots filled my stomach. After a few tense beats, he grinned and said, "I don't know about you, but I could really go for a burger. Try to be quick, huh?" We said okay, and Pop stomped toward the rental car to smoke. As soon as he released us from his gaze, my anxiety level dropped. Maybe the day would improve a lot once we had a good meal. Maybe we would even have some fun. I salivated the more I thought about a cheeseburger and fries with lots of ketchup. I stepped into the tent, zipped the flap closed, and changed into my dry jeans and a sweatshirt. When I stepped back out, I found Jess crouched next to a tree in his wet shorts and soaked t-shirt, tossing pebbles into the woods, his legs and arms covered in goosebumps. "Your turn," I said, and he jumped up, his sneakers returning to the saturated ground with a splash. He kicked off one wet shoe outside the tent and then attempted to angle that foot inside the opening. But he lost his balance, and his heel squished down in the mud, his socks still half on and now dripping with sludge, which made us both laugh deep belly laughs. He managed to wriggle his other foot free from the sneaker, wobbling until he jerked back, and that foot splattered into the mud as well. My laughter cut short as I reminded him not to track the mud in with his sopping brown socks, but he'd already stepped onto the tent floor. My stomach dropped. He'd done exactly what Pop told him not to do. I knew this wouldn't go well. The disastrous fishing trip had already stressed Pop to the brink of full-on Charles Manson level crazy.
Thank you. And the scene continues as much as I wanted you to read. I couldn't decide where to end it. And then I also thought it's so hard to read what happens next. And
Yeah,
I thought, I don't need to have you read that here right now necessarily because it's hard. It's painful. And you capture it in a really vulnerable and clear way. I'm curious. You have this quote that I pulled of your childhood in the Hampton Bays of Long Island during the 80s. You write, "We were boys without fathers, even though at this point in our childhoods, all our fathers were still alive." Looking back now, what do you make of the upbringing you and your brother and many of your friends experienced? Why do you think the lack of parenting among these men was so prevalent?
yeah. I really don't know if I have an answer for that, but it's so interesting to look back on our whole life. Like everybody's life is this tapestry of just a million choices and events and so many different things that the idea of having control over what happens in our life is actually really kind of laughable.
Yeah.
At least in hindsight, I had like very little control over so many different things, but we just end up having all that experience to draw from.
Yeah.
And I really feel like at this point, it's a strange thing to say, but I'm really grateful for everything that's happened because I think that I appreciate everything that I have a lot. And mostly that's because of not having very much to start with. Like if somebody buys me a sandwich or something, like a friend says, "No, I got this," like
Yeah.
that's a big thing to me. Just anybody doing the littlest thing. Yeah. So as much as I would have loved to have had tons and tons of money growing up, the freedom that that can afford you, I don't think I would have much to write about if I did. Not that anybody else would want to read. I mean, they'd be like, "Ooh, the rich person is going to write this rich
Well,
story."
you got to write a little bit about the rich people in the East End, right,
Yeah.
in your
Yeah.
novel.
True.
Well, what about those friends of yours? Are you in touch with any of those boys from growing up? Did they suffer from addiction? Do you know?
Well, the two boys that are in that portion of the memoir, I really haven't had contact with for a super long time. You know how friendships, you kind of veer away like at certain
Yes, for
ages.
sure.
I was probably just turning 12 that summer, the Boys Without Fathers section. For the listeners, we ended up doing something extremely
Yeah.
reckless with young boys. Like, and the kind of
Yes.
stuff for every mother is probably like, oh.
I know, I was really worried.
Yeah, my own mother, in hindsight, she was like, "You did what?"
Yeah. Well, you describe it really well. That was really fun to read. I mean, fun and also scary, but
Yeah. As soon as I wrote the line, "We were boys without fathers," the memoir had a different title for a really long
oh,
time. And I ended up realizing that would fit well for the book. But I had that as a standalone piece originally, and then it became part of the book. So it was the reverse of some other pieces.
yeah.
It really hit me as soon as I wrote that line. The kid who lived next door, his father had basically like had a mental breakdown.
Mhm.
So his father was physically present, but he wasn't. And then the kid up the street, his father was never in his life as far as I knew. I'd never heard a word about him. I knew that the guy lived somewhere really far away. That was it. And then my brother and I, who were the other two of the four boys in that whole crazy, dramatic, dangerous scene, our father lived in the same town, but we only saw him a few hours a week on Sunday afternoons. It's only as an adult that I think back to how much I resented the obligation to go sit in my father's living room for like a few hours while he chain smoked, and my brother and I were just supposed to sit quietly. There's a huge difference between my mom being our full-time parent and the feeling of just kind of paying our dues sort of as kids.
Yeah. I wonder what it's like to go back and be able to acknowledge that because back at the time you had to do these things and maybe subconsciously try to get as much as you can out of your father emotionally. Maybe there's a
Yeah.
chance, but in hindsight, you realize That was awful, and I
Yeah.
can't believe I had to do that, and I don't know, I could talk forever about parents who don't, and I don't mean this just about my early experience, but just from doing this show and talking to so many memoirists and teaching people about memoir and listening to their stories. I just think, I don't know, some people, they happen to be your parent, but that's all. They had you and that's all, right? But we can't really shake away how they affect us and the loss
Yeah.
there.
When it comes to parents, I got really lucky with one parent and I got unlucky with another. But it was a little bit of a surprise, maybe once I was doing major revisions of the memoir, but it kind of surprised me that I was almost being much nicer to my father than I was expecting, or maybe even felt like at first more than he deserved. But the more I went over the memoir manuscripts, and this is over more years, the more I realized it was healthy for me that I was really thinking about his experience too. It doesn't excuse anything at all.
Mhm.
Like, I know people that had worse childhoods than my father, even though his was pretty bad, and they were the opposite in the way that they treated people. So that was like my mission as I grew into an adult too. So I think that we can take positives from even really negative experiences.
I think we have that in common.
Yeah, and even with my father, what's allowed me to not really feel like I have any resentment towards him anymore is the fact that I finally really understood in writing this how much he suffered as an adult, not anything to do with, like, this excuses it because this happened to him as a kid or anything. It was like he was mentally ill, but this was also far enough back that it was way less mainstream to get help for mental illness, and I think it's great that we're at a time now where people do, and they talk about it openly constantly, but I don't think he ever even considered doing anything for his mental health, ever.
Mm-mm. I think generationally and gender-wise, that was just not
Yeah,
something. I mean, because 'cause we're pretty much the same era, I'm pretty
yeah.
sure. And when you're teaching memoir and you're reading material from your students, do you think that depiction of other people piece comes up a lot? Is it something that you try to talk to them about when they're writing about others, especially those who may have hurt them?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the biggest thing for them to get into their mind is that we want to avoid revenge because
Yes,
it's so
yes.
tempting and it can be really justified too,
Yeah.
because some people have done really horrible things to other people, and you don't necessarily need to find the good in that person or anything to understand them or anything like that, but just to go from like a two-dimensional villain to fully processed, for the writer to have fully processed everything enough so that it doesn't feel like revenge. You can still portray the person as being horrible, but there'll be more of an awareness that you've looked at yourself at the very least just as close. That's really important, is like if I'm gonna show anybody else's flaws, I have to really think about what are mine, and those should
Yeah.
probably be mentioned too. But sometimes, like with me, I ended up empathizing with my father a lot more than I was expecting, because he does disappear at a certain point in my life, which is in the memoir, but it was during those years that it allowed me to put more perspective on my relationship with my father when I was unclear if he was alive or dead. With that big mystery, it was kind of like it's not as much of like a tangible thing. He's not in the room with me. I don't have to decide, do I like this guy sitting right here? It was
Yeah.
more like reflecting over my entire lifetime with him, and also what I know about him and his past. Because my grandfather definitely was a rough, rough person too. So in a sense, my father was just sort of the predictable next generation. And I think a lot of us that are memoirists, we're the ones that have decided we don't want to like continue on with the cycle.
I do love thinking about that. Yeah, I think that's really smart what you just said.
Thank you.
Yeah. Do you think that in earlier iterations of the memoir, you were still pretty angry at your father? Is that one of the ways it changed?
Yeah, it's probably a factor. And I really don't want to give anything away too
Yeah,
much,
don't give
but
anything away. You can just bail on this question if you
no, no,
want.
no, but when it comes to my brother and my father, there were key things with both of them that I think in 2015, when I started the manuscript, I didn't realize that it would be much easier if I knew the answer to a couple of questions. And so it was many years later, really, it was 2018 or 2019 that I got some more clarity on certain things. And then even more in the past few years.
So how did you know it was done? I mean, how did you know this was ready? This was what it needed to be? I'm just so curious if that came from inside, if it came from trusted readers.
I'm probably an anomaly where I don't usually share that much work with even my most trusted people, even my most closest friends who are also writers who I know are awesome. I don't know why, but until I feel like I've pretty much finished it for myself, I don't usually really share anything with anybody. So I didn't get a lot of feedback along the way. I think I really just had to trust my gut at a certain point too. I know that you teach as well too, and sometimes it's sort of similar to recovery, where if you're sponsoring somebody, you get to hear your advice to them that you know is going to help them, and then you realize, wait, I should take my own advice.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So you had clarity. You had maybe the distance, time, progression in your own craft,
yeah,
working on other people's pages, which maybe was like a palate cleanser. And then you could go back and look at your pages under the same lens. It's such a rewarding experience when we feel that it's come together. And I would love for you to read that second excerpt that I picked. What I really appreciated about this was that you gave us this play by play. You really embodied the experience of where you were in your drinking at this point in time.
yeah. And maybe to give a little context to this
Sure.
scene too, like, so this whole chapter prior to the part that I'm going to read, this excerpt is going to end where the chapter ends. And everything leading up to this is in 2002, I was completely drunk in an airport at the Denver airport, actually, after one of my closest friends and I, we were in a band together. And the very last time that we played any kind of show was the night before. So we stayed up all night drinking until like 5 o'clock in the morning. We woke up knowing that we were really late to go to the airport. We raced up Long Island to get to LaGuardia, barely made our flight. And then we ended up drinking way too much on the plane from New York to Denver. And then we were supposed to go from Denver to Portland. So the last little bit for context is we missed our plane in Denver, already drunk at noon, and then we had 9 hours to wait for the next flight. So it was just a disastrous drunken day. It's one of those that stands out in my mind because it was so vivid. And yeah, I was just not in my element at all and way too drunk to be there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is also 5 years before I got sober too. So that tells you a lot too. Okay, so here we go. I had no idea I was in the midst of running a marathon that day, one that had started with my first drink when I was 12, or that I'd been running for all that time, even when sitting perfectly still. I'd been running the same labyrinthine loops for more than 15 years by then, fully ignorant to the fact that the race was rigged, and I'd been living within the warped laws of an MC Escher world, my existence one big glitch in the time-space continuum, an ongoing exercise of going up one escalator only to go back down another. Sure, I made deals with myself from time to stop drinking for a day or two, sometimes for a week or a bit beyond, but always while clinging to the belief that I could do it better after a break. Like a gambler who cleaves to those rare times when he won big, I had a knack for filtering out the history of losses and low bottom moments that had led me to stop in the first place. I was far from winning by the time Sal and I arrived in Portland and met up with Jess and some mutual friends, and we all stumbled from one bar to the next. But I had a faint recollection of feeling I had succeeded at some point in the past, that the good times had been real, and so I held on to the baseless faith that I might win again, believing that I might feel something like happiness someday. I'd spent my life worrying about my brother, but the consequences of my own path of self destruction had been accumulating with such intensity, forcing me to finally begin worrying in earnest for myself. And yet, I should have worried a lot more. Like so many other times over so many years, I was too drunk to realize I was dying, or to know that there were all sorts of ways a person could die aside from a flat line that could be measured by a machine. I had no inkling that this day that began in Denver, which had now finally fizzled down to ashes in a low lit bar at last call, would repeat itself hundreds of times more. But if the past truly was prologue, of course it would repeat. It would all be exactly the same on the level of soul deterioration, even if details of the drunkenness played out completely different. Maybe I needed that ridiculous day in the airport, along with every other one of the innumerable low bottom moments since taking my first drink as a little kid. Maybe my conscience needed to finally amplify to a scream in order to be heard, and for my thoroughly punished and sedated mind to finally have the epiphany. Looking back now, it's hard to believe that it would take another 5 years, but it would. And for Jess, it would take a whole lot longer.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could share a bit about your path to publishing.
Yeah, my path was circuitous, long. I try to always share these experiences with people, though, so it's encouraging.
Yes.
Honestly, when I was just about to start querying, I got so much negativity from people like who, whether they had queried themselves or not, they were convinced that it was nearly impossible to get a good agent or
Oh my.
so. I mean, it started a long, long time ago. The first things I published were some short stories and poems in the 2000s. When I started at Pacific University's MFA, that was from 2009 to 2012. That's when I really started to just become obsessed with writing as much as I could to send out places to get things published. I knew I probably couldn't get a teaching position without publishing a lot. And all of that, I mean, it was kind of healthy anxiety, but I wouldn't recommend doing it for very long because
You were
it's not,
younger, right? I
yeah,
mean, you were
sure.
younger, but you were hustling. So for this book, I mean, was it agented?
No, no, and actually, that was something that I was really happy to finally make the decision about. I have an agent that I worked with for my novel. She doesn't handle nonfiction, so I knew from the get-go that if I was gonna have an agent for the memoir, it would be a different agent, and that's why I did actually query for this book at times over the last couple of years. And I got some really positive responses, but most of them were really clear about saying they don't know how to sell memoir if it's not a famous person or if you don't have some extreme newsworthy story.
That's what happened with mine too.
Yeah. So memoirs do have it tough in a lot of ways, but I do think if you find just the right person that knows just the right person, whatever book they put the money behind is the book that's going to do well. That's the sad
Yeah.
part of it. They just happen to pick certain books where it's not necessarily the best one, but whatever. I mean, that stuff's so outside of my control.
Yeah.
So I decided that I would go with a really small independent press, and that's been a great experience. So, like, I have a variety of experiences. My poetry book was with a university press. Then the novel, The East End, is with a HarperCollins imprint. And then Boys Without Fathers is with a tiny small press. And then my next novel, and I just completed what's either a long novella or a short novel.
Mhm.
I don't know where it came from, but for about a month to start the summer, I just did nothing but that.
Wow.
So I'm hoping to find a home for these next couple of books this year too.
Yeah.
But I don't know what type of publisher it might be. Like now that I can pass along to students, like there's all sorts of pros and cons. That's really what it comes
Yes.
down to.
Yes, and what do you want at the end? Do you wanna be holding a book? Do you wanna be a professional who gets to speak at events and sell your book? Do you want to be on the New York Times bestseller list? Like, there's so many ways you can think about what it is that you want, and some people wanna just complete their story and
Yeah.
see it in print.
Yeah, and this is the one and only book where I felt like, in a sense, I'm almost donating it to the world right now. Like, I don't really expect to make hardly anything with such a tiny press. This was a book that was more like a book I had to write and a book that I know will help some people. And so I just want
Mhm.
the biggest number of people that would benefit from reading it, knowing about it and getting to read
Yeah.
it. That's really all it came down to for this one.
Yeah. Well, what advice would you like to share with writers working on their memoirs?
Well, I'm glad that you asked the self-care question because that's really, really important. There's a lot to be said too that there's some days that it's just not the right day to write that part. But I would say that you're going to definitely benefit from writing that part. There is definitely a catharsis that takes place with memoir that you can't really get quite the same with other genres, at least for me. And the catharsis really makes it worth it too. Like it's basically all the work that we do in recovery too. I could just go about my life and never really look inward like they recommend with like step work or whatever.
Mhm.
But whatever is sitting there is just going to be sitting there. And I might as well let go of it if I can. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And are there some books that you wanna recommend? Any book at all that you'd like to recommend that informed your writing process or that you think writers working on memoirs should really go out and read?
Hmm, that's a great question. I mean, there's a few classics I would recommend to anybody that just likes a good book, but especially if you want to write memoir. Like The Glass Castle is written like a novel,
Mhm.
which I really appreciate as really feeling like a novelist first. The Liars Club is really classic, Mary Carr. I also really like Mary Carr's craft book.
Mhm. The Art of Memoir.
Yeah, The Art of Memoir. I used that in my class. I really liked Wild, Cheryl Stray's
Mhm.
memoir, because she hiked the whole Pacific Crest Trail.
Mhm.
And I really love how the hike itself became the backbone for the whole story. Like, I was really invested in the hike itself. She
Yeah.
was able to bring in everything else along the way.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
something that I recommend to students a lot too, is if you can pick, like, some sort of touchstone, grounding, really, like, bedrock moment or period of time that you can keep coming back to, then you really have freedom to go into any kind of doorway to the past along the way that you want,
Yeah.
without feeling like we're pausing for a long time to look back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Thank you. Okay, I'll put those in the show notes, and I would also like to put links to where people can find you and get a copy of the book in the show notes.
Yeah. Well, I'm on Instagram as Jason Allen Books. I'm on Facebook. It's just Jason Allen. If you wanted to find me on Facebook, you might target the search. I live in Wichita, Kansas now. That might bring it up. I don't really use social media probably as much as authors are recommended to do. I haven't been on X for a couple of years, even though I
Me
still have an
either.
account on there. My website is jasonallenauthor.com.
Okay. I'll put those all in the show notes.
Awesome.
And I want to congratulate you on this new book. I'm so excited for it to be in the world. And thank you so much for being my guest. I just love talking with you.
I love talking with you too.
Thank you for listening to Let's Talk Memoir. For more about my story and the project that started me on my memoir-loving path, you can check out my memoir, When She Comes Back, which is available wherever books are sold, and as an audiobook that I narrated. For more about this episode and my guest, please visit the links in the show notes. You can also find a complete catalog of Let's Talk Memoir episodes at ronitplank.com/Let's Talk Memoir. Let's Talk Memoir is also on Substack. About once a month, I publish memoir craft advice, additional interviews, and upcoming classes that I'm offering. There's no paywall. If you are a fan of Let's Talk Memoir, please feel free to share it with your friends. And if you feel moved to leave a podcast rating and review, I appreciate it very much. That helps more writers and readers find the show. Thank you so much for being here.